Let's start with C. The cycle almost always begins with constant reactivity. Your day is dictated to you, not by your priorities, but by your interruptions. Those could be emails, phone calls, unexpected meetings, or urgent issues that suddenly become your responsibility. You come in with a plan, and within the first 20 minutes, poof, it's gone. Right? We've all lived that day. Somewhere along the way, many leaders start believing this: if I can just respond faster, I'll catch up. But the truth is, reactivity doesn't create relief. It creates momentum in the wrong direction. So you have to ask yourself, right now, what drives your day? What are your priorities? Are they the things that really matter to you, or do you end up being pulled away by everybody else's emergencies? We often call that firefighting. Running from one crisis to the next, almost never are they your own crisis. That is constant reactivity. And that leads to the second piece in the chaos cycle, H, high cognitive load. This is the part of the cycle that doesn't always show up on the outside, but man, does it consume you on the inside. You are holding everything in your head. Things you need to follow up on, decisions you haven't made yet, problems that you haven't had time to think through. These are the things that wake you up at 2:15 in the morning, and your brain is just going and going and going, and you cannot go back to sleep. You find yourself by 2:30 with a cup of coffee in front of your computer. When you are stuck in high cognitive load, nothing feels finished, nothing feels settled. The brain never shuts off. This is where good leaders start to burn out. And it's not because you don't care. It's not because you're ineffective. Don't think that for a moment. It's just simply because you're carrying so much more in your brain than any one person ever should. So pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what am I carrying right now that should not be living in my head? That is that high cognitive load. It's all those things stuck in your brain that you have not had the time or the capacity to get taken care of. And it's that high cognitive load that almost always leads to the A in the cycle of chaos, which is absence of clarity. That absence of clarity really comes down to this: when everything feels important, nothing is clear. Again, back to running from fire to fire to fire. When you have way too many initiatives, priorities blur. Those of you who listen to the show regularly will remember that at a point, I worked under someone who had 13 different initiatives going at the same time. Our priorities were completely blurred. We were totally unclear of where we were trying to go. Absence of clarity also comes from not taking a step back. Because when you don't take a step back or get up on the balcony like I like to talk about, that's when you lose sight of what actually matters the most. When you do step up on the balcony, when you do spend that time taking that step back, that's when you can actually look at and think about what your true priorities are and how well are you managing them. What evidence do you have? But lacking that step back, you really do lose sight of what matters. You get stuck in the weeds. That's the phrase sometimes that we'll use, is stuck in the weeds. Now, let me say this, because this really sits at the core of my work. This really sits at the number one thing I help leaders with. The leaders that I work with are not unclear because they're lazy or because they don't want to be clear. Oftentimes, they're unclear because they've never been given the time, the space, or the permission to just take a step back and think. Just in this last week, I began work with another group of leaders, a team that I had met a couple of times, but it was the first time I was on site with them. And the time I was on site with them this past week truly was chaos. 100%, all 5 pieces of the chaos cycle, alive and well. It's not that they don't want to be stuck in this, they just don't know. And we're going to have a follow-up conversation from that visit about all 5 pieces of the chaos theory and how it was alive and well. But the reality is, up until this point, they haven't been given the space or even the ability to name what it is that they're dealing with. Maybe you're there, maybe you're not, but Here's a really powerful question you could consider. If somebody asked you to name your top 1 or 2 priorities in your current leadership role, could you? Could you really say, and not just say these are my priorities, but are you actually doing them? Are you actually working on them? And what if I ask your leadership team the exact same question? Would they answer the same way as you? It's always a good way to look at it, right? It's that lack of clarity that really, really is a struggle.